All right, so we have our two equations. Step one is already done, son. And then step two, what do we do next?
You would have to substitute.
You would have to substitute. So this is where I noticed confusion. If they're both y equals, how would we substitute that? The y equals and plug it into the other one. So which one do we want to pick, the first or the second? The second. Okay, so we're going to take the second one and plug it into, so here, step two. So we're going to take the second one, y equals 3x plus 1. And then I'm going to highlight that in my color for y. Then we're going to substitute into the first equation. So if the first equation is y equals negative x minus 5, instead of this y, I'm going to substitute the 3x plus 1. So I'm going to put 3x plus 1 equals negative x minus 5. So you're just putting them equal to each other, because if they're both y equals, then we need to put them equal to each other. So this one came from the second equation. 5. So again, we should only see one variable. That's a good way to see if you put it in correctly, you substituted correctly. We now only see x. Now sometimes you can see y, it's just lately we've just been choosing the y equals, but sometimes you will just have y. All right, now we can solve for x. What would we do first?
Minus 1.
All right, yeah, so this, when we have variables and constants on both sides, it really doesn't matter which order we start with. So we could, so 1 is a constant, we want to move it to the other side with negative 5. That cancels out, we have 3x equals negative x minus 6. All right, so all of our constants are on the right side. Now we need all of our variable terms on the left side. So then we need to move. And then last step, divide by your coefficient. This one will give you a decimal. Remember, I always want you to keep it as a simplified fraction. So what would be the simplest form of negative 6/4? Negative 3/2.
Is that all?
For that part, but remember, it's a little tedious, but, and also slow down and check your work, because you know how it is when you make one little mistake and it messes everything up and then you have to start over. Especially with these negatives, to always double check, because I know the negatives always mess people up. All right, so that was, oh, I forgot to write that we were solving. And then what is step 4?
It is
Yep, so we have x equals negative 3/2. So which of these equations do you think would be easier to plug it into and find the other variable? Minus 5. So instead of this x, I'm going to substitute negative 3/2. Now be careful, because it's negative x. We have to keep the negative. Substitute negative 3/2 and then minus 5.
I missed that 3. We plugged it in. You said what happened to step 3? We just didn't put it.
It was solving it. I forgot to write it. Into the other equation, any other equation, just to see what y equals now. So now we have to solve for y. So first multiply, what happens when we have negative? So remember, if this is a negative on this side, it's just like negative 1. And then it becomes positive 3/2. And then negative 5, let's convert that to a fraction. and then multiply both sides by 2, because we want the common denominator. So it'd be 2. And then then just subtract across your numerators. What's 3 minus 10?
7.
So, but 3 minus 10, negative 7 over 2. And we're just going to keep that in fraction form, and that's in simplest terms. Solution.
-3, -7.
Negative 3 halves, negative 7 halves. They're fractions. So put a box. Step 5. We need to check to make sure. Yeah, it's a lot. So that's, when you're doing this on Delta Math, you have to be using a piece of paper. You can't do this in your head. So everyone needs to be showing your work. Otherwise, I'm going to say you're a genius and need to move on to college right away. No, I'm just kidding. But show your work, because if you're asking me for help, I need to see your stuff to help you. All right, check your work. Go back to the original equations and substitute the solution in, the ordered pair in. So we had y equals negative x minus 5 and 1. And then we're going to substitute the ordered pair. So our y value is equals negative times negative 3 halves minus 5. Notice how we already did the same thing up here when we were solving for. Did negative times negative 3 halves, which was positive 3 halves. We already converted minus 5 to a fraction, so I'm just going to rewrite what we already just did. Negative 7 halves equals negative 7 halves. And then the second equation, all right, so now solve what is 3 times negative 3 halves. And multiply cross. What's 3 times negative 3?
-9.
Negative 9 over 2, yep. And then we can convert the, so if it's 1 over 1, how would we convert that to having it over 2? 1 over 1 is not equivalent. What 2 over 2. If the denominator is 2, we would multiply both sides by 2 to make that equivalent. All right. Negative 7 over 2. So they both check out. So that is the correct solution.